Yeah, so welcome again. This is another YouTube video here with the Blindside shots coming to you from somewhere in Seoul. It's myself, Steph Takuda. I'm from South Africa, and
Andrew Farrell from Ireland.
Andrew Farrell from Ireland. South African, Irish. It's that harp thingy that you find on the Guinness cans. Right, so there's actually a lot of history behind that harp. I've read up on it, like it's really cool. But
That's actually the Ireland baseball team, right?
Is it?
Yeah.
No way, Ireland has a baseball team.
Well, yeah, they've got a bunch of guys who get together to play baseball.
With baseball bats in
Yeah.
the field. Much like the South African baseball team, I suppose. But we're not here to talk about baseball, we are here to talk about rugby. More like off the field kind of stuff as opposed to on the field. And what we're going to talk to you now in this video, in this segment, will be about South Africa, the South African teams post 2020 Super Rugby, basically the scene, the club rugby scene internationally. For those of you who don't know, at the moment we have Super Rugby in the Southern Hemisphere, including teams from South Africa, Australia and New Zealand, the original three. Actually started, I believe, in 1996 with a Super 10. Recently teams from Argentina and Japan have been added, the Jaguares and the Sunwolves. We'll talk about that at a different time, how the competition is going. And then in the Northern Hemisphere, and then of course you have your local provincial, the MPC in New Zealand, the Currie Cup in South Africa. And then in the Northern Hemisphere, you have the Heineken, well, it used to be called the Heineken Cup, now it's called the European Championship. European Champions Cup and so on. For teams from the Six Nations teams, And then of course you got the top 14, the Pro 14, which is basically, it used to be called the Gaelic League or the Celtic League.
It's called the Celtic League first, yeah.
Celtic League, right, yeah.
Then the Magners League, and then the Pro 12, and then the Pro 14.
Yeah, and so the reason why it's now called the Pro 14 instead of the Pro 12 is Super Rugby was cut down from 18 teams to 15 last season. And that means three teams had to go. Two of those teams ended up being from South Africa, the Kings and the Cheetahs. They were the two of the teams with the worst records, along with the Thos from Australia. SA Rugby, to their credit, look, I can sit here for an hour and talk about how garbage SA Rugby is at the best of times, but to their credit, they managed to find a home for the Kings, the Southern Kings out of PE, and the Cheetahs, Central Union out of Bloemfontein in the Free State, and they found them a home in the Pro 12, the Pro 14, and. Just looking at, the Kings absolutely bit the dust, but the Cheetahs, I believe, have done phenomenal. They've gone 18 months, I read the other day, they've gone 18 months without having pre-season because it was Super Rugby, then Currie Cup, then straight out of Currie Cup they went into the Northern Hemisphere season, and they've lost a lot of players along the way, either to other franchises, Makazolo Mpimpi, for example, to the Sharks, Raymond Will to the Stormers, and just the fact that they've been able to go for 18 months without, not just being competitive, but now actually finding themselves in the playoffs of the Pro 14 is I think it goes to show two things. Number one, hats off to the Cheetahs, and secondly, that while they were struggling in the Super Rugby, they've been able to, in a relatively short time, have relative success in the Pro 14.
The standards obviously not as high, but at the same time, the standards actually improved a lot this year as well. Yeah. The Italian team, so
they have.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, it's good. They've definitely added something to the league. They're playing the defending champions, the Scarlets, which is going to be really, really tough for them. By the time you're watching this, that game will probably be over, and the Scarlets will probably have won that game. But that doesn't really matter. I'd say they've exceeded expectations anyway.
Yeah.
The Kings were the Kings, but I don't think anybody is getting too ahead of themselves at the moment. They'll probably just get better year on year, hopefully from here on in.
Yeah.
So the debate has now changed to how many South African teams do we want to play in this tournament, and also when is the earliest we can possibly get them into the European Cup.
Right.
And if it's going to get to the stage now where the South African teams are going to be playing against the French teams, the English teams, and obviously still Ireland, Scotland, Wales and Italy in the Pro 14, add that into the European Cup too.
Yep.
They're going to be awash with money very soon. The TV deals for next season's Pro 14 have almost been sorted, and the traditional big name in the region, Sky Sports, have lost all their games. They've just simply been outbid by a bunch of other TV channels and internet channels. So every single game is going to be broadcast next year, from what I gather, on various different platforms, multiple languages too. And basically the TV money is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger every year. So we're now looking at a stage where the Pro 14 is going to be way bigger next year than it has been at any other point. It's going to be a wash of money. Prize money is going to increase then as well. And if the card of European Cup Rugby is added to the South African teams at the end of all this, by 2020 they reckon they want to have 4 teams in Europe and keeping 4 teams in the Southern Hemisphere. First off, can that work?
No. This was what was this was what was mentioned earlier. So if you look at South Africa, you have like the Currie Cup, right? The most teams you can put in the Premier Division of the Currie Cup is 8. That being, if we're going by Super Rugby names, Stormers, Bulls, Sharks, Lions, Cheetahs, Kings. Now then those are the big 5, right? And then you 3 smaller teams being Kings from East London, the Pumas from Nelspruit, and they've punched above their weight. Actually, Vincent Koch, who's now playing for Saracens, and Thos de Klerk, who's now playing for Sale Sharks, we're sitting outside, you know. So Vincent Koch played for the Stormers for a while, and Thos de Klerk played for the Lions, but before that they both played for the Pumas. So it's not a useless team. You know, they do deliver. With that being said, so that's the other team, and then of course the Kiwis out of Kimberley. So those are the 8 teams that they are thinking about bringing in.
Yeah.
Keeping the 4 teams that are in the Super Rugby at the moment there, and then adding the Pumas and the Kiwis to the European calendar. In my opinion, I think they should scrap that idea. Align all the South African teams with the European calendar, pull out of Super Rugby, and there are several reasons for it. Number one, money, as you just mentioned. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And one of the problems in South Africa is that we lose a lot of players to Europe, exactly because of funding and money. You know, we just can't keep up with it. However, if you're part of the European system, in theory, that should circumvent the problem that's there in the first place. Number one. Number two, just in terms of travel, you know, going back and forth to Australia, New Zealand is it takes a lot out of you, and South African teams have never done well in Australasia. And then 3, just in terms of competitiveness, you know, we're talking about the Cheetahs never really being able to. They made the playoffs in Super Rugby once in, I believe, 12 years. First year in Pro 14, they're there at the end of a very, very, very long season that extended more than a year. Is it a fluke? Who knows? We'll see next year. But so for those 3 reasons, I just think it's better to just stick with it. Maybe stick with the Kings and the Cheetahs, keep them there, and then bring the Stormers, Bulls, Sharks, and Lions into Europe. From a European perspective, how do you see that going? Good, bad?
Yeah, there's a lot of information there. It would be interesting. It would probably, you could definitely add another conference to that, try and keep the South African teams playing at home for as long as possible as well, so they don't have to sort of fly up to Wales, play the Cardiff Blues, fly back home, play 2 games in Durban, then go up to Glasgow and come back. It'd be nice if they're kind of blocked it together for them. I guess kind of like they do at the moment in Super Rugby. There's something really weird about the Pro 14 at the moment, in that the Cheetahs are the 3rd best team in their conference, but they can't qualify for Europe. I really don't like that idea. I think if you're going to be in this tournament, then you should be able to qualify for the other one. But the South African teams are at it. I think it's all about the European Cup, though. It's hard. The problem is that the future of European rugby is just unresolved too, and it doesn't look like this will necessarily help, because it just feels like inevitably, for me, there's going to be an alignment between England and the Pro 14. I think that's eventually going to happen. But the thing is now, the way, and the South Africans would love that too. If they're getting into bed with the English, then you're just, I mean, that is the biggest rugby playing nation out there, so that's just an enormous amount of money. The thing is, the bargaining position of the Pro 14 is now getting so strong that they won't have to necessarily do it by the English league's terms. So that there could be a lot of arguing and bitterness over that, like there is in the European Cup at the moment. Yeah, of course, it'd be great if the Bulls and the Stormers and the Sharks are playing in the Pro 14. It feels like fantasy stuff at the moment. I just can't really see it at the moment. I think for now, they need to stop worrying about getting the USA teams and Canadian teams there too. I think they just need to build on what they have for now. But World Cup cycles are always the best time to do these things. The World Cup's on next year, so a decision you'd imagine is going to have to be made pretty soon, or else it might as well just wait until after the 2023 World Cup. I think it's been a success so far. The only problem is that they're not getting anybody going to the games in South Africa, and it just looks awful from a TV point of view because there's so many empty seats. I think if they can just somehow attract more fans to turn up for this tournament, then that will definitely help the image of this league. But for the moment, I'd say just build on what you have so far, get more people going to games in South Africa. If the Kings can get more competitive, it would just be a dream for the league, because as I was saying, it's just the amount of TV channels that are showing interest in showing this tournament now is just gone. I've never heard of some of these stations before, but they're able to outbid one of Rupert Murdoch's main.
That's insane.
So and it's on, and the amazing thing is it's going to be on free to air next year TV, so like they're able to take the loss by putting so many games on free to air in domestic markets, you know, the Irish language or the Welsh language or the Scottish language. The BBC has lost games next year as well, and Sky Sports have lost games because everybody else wants to show this tournament anyway. So I'd say build on what they have so far, just keep the money coming in. One thing that the Pro 14 simply has to do, just to wrap up on this one for now, I'd love to see more South African teams coming in, absolutely. I think they need to build on what they have so far though. One thing that the Pro 14 really needs to sort out is their scheduling. There's two flashpoints coming up. Number one is that the Pro 14 final this year, which is on in Dublin, is almost running at the same time as the Champions League final, and Liverpool are in the Champions League final. And unfortunately, they are such a big draw that the Liverpool being in the Champions League final now looks like it's going to change the kick-off time. And then the second big point is that they need to stop hosting big games on during the Six Nations. So if Leinster are the biggest team in the league and the Scarlets, they should not be playing each other twice throughout the Six Nations when all of the main players are not available. They need to arrange the fixtures way better, so you have the prime fixtures not on when the Six Nations on, because it's just embarrassing to have it that way. But otherwise, I'd say keep the two South African teams in for now. Build towards bringing more in the future, but don't keep reinventing the wheel just yet. Just build on what
absolutely,
you have for
absolutely. I fully agree. Consolidate and then expand. I think you do, just quickly, final point that I'm going to make here is you were talking about the crowd attendances. Bloemfontein has never been one of the, even in Super Rugby, Currie Cup, it's never been one of those places that people flock to for any reason. You know, it's a nice little town, but you know, but the thing is that, again, they've been playing rugby kind of like non-stop for 18 months. They don't know a lot about the European teams. There's no hunger in Bloemfontein for rugby. It's like, okay, I've been, you know, you watch the game week in and week out, and summer has come and summer is gone, and winter is coming, winter is gone. It's just, they need a break. They need a long break. I'm pretty sure people will come back. They need time to sufficiently promote the competition. In terms of the other cities in South Africa, there won't be any trouble. The stadiums will be full enough. In Super Rugby, the South African stadiums are always the fullest. Sorry, I'm just going to put this up here. So yeah, it's exciting. Like you said, it's a bit of a fantasy. But if you can have let's say the top 6 teams from South Africa playing against, you know, the top teams from Europe, and you have a Premier Division and the First Division. I think it could potentially be the biggest rugby competition in the world. And
money-wise, it definitely would.
Money-wise, absolutely. And of course, if South Africa pulls out of Super Rugby, that's it. Super Rugby's done.
Okay.
So yeah.
That's a
All right.
conversation for another time. But yeah,
All right.
thank you for listening.
Cheers.